Hey guys, so hello everyone. Let's kick things off. My name's Catherine from Pathway CTM. So thank you all for joining us today for our afternoon session. It's great to see some familiar faces, names on the Zoom today. So again, thanks for taking your time to join us. So today's session is, all about understanding strengths and what your strengths are. We have a great guest joining us today, Lauren from Cappfinity. So I will hand you over to her in a moment, but I just want to go through what to expect for today. So, if you do have any questions at any part of the session, there's no silly questions. Use this time. We're in a safe environment. You can ask anything. So please do that. And a little bit of housekeeping, as you can, how do you ask those questions? So if you guys are dialing in from your mobile phone, that's absolutely fine. You can simply text us on the number that sent you the text earlier about today, or you can email us at student@pathwayctm.com. For those of you that are joining us via Zoom today, you will see there's a Q&A box and also a chat box. So please do use the Q&A box to ask your questions and we will answer them for you. And do feel free to drop a message. Some of you have already been saying hello, that's great. So, do use the chat box as well for anything that you might want to input in today's session. So what are you going to get out from today? So there might be some people who are joining us for the first time who have no clue what a strength profile is. That's absolutely fine. So we're going to be going over, exactly what a strength profile is and why people use it. And also those of you that perhaps have completed a strengths profile already, now is the time to ask the experts, ask those questions, what does this strength mean and how do I use it when applying for a job or in an actual interview situation? So hopefully you guys have got lots of questions and I hope you really enjoy the session today. I'm now going to hand you over to our lovely guest who is joining us. So Lauren, over to you.
Thanks so much, Catherine. I'm going to now share my screen with you guys, so just hold on with me a moment. And can everybody see that okay?
Yeah, all good.
Perfect. So I'd like to welcome you all to the Zoom today. I'm here to answer any questions and although there's quite a few of us on the call, if you need that one-to-one coaching advice or you've got an assessment centre coming up or an interview and you want some questions around your strengths, then just feel free to drop them in the chat and we can pick that up throughout today's session. So as Catherine mentioned, I'm Lauren Scarlett and I'm the consultant on the product called Strengths Profile. So that is a part of a company called Cappfinity. And we do specialize in recruitment and development assessments. So a lot of the organizations and the companies that you'll be applying to in your next steps in your exciting careers, many of the recruitment processes and also the development they'll be doing once you land those jobs will be using our assessments. So do use this time to pick my brain and answer any questions that you may be having. So I'm just going to kickstart with a bit of a recap. So for some of you, this will be, you would have seen these slides before, and for some of you, they may be new. But essentially, 43% of employers in the UK are now using some form of strengths-based assessment. So what does that mean for you guys on the call? What it means is you're more than likely at some point in your career, whether it is that next step or the next 3 steps in a few years' times, you will come across strengths. So knowing your strengths and being able to articulate your strengths is going to really give you the heads up in a lot of the processes and training that you have coming up in your future careers. So, if anything, it is important to know what your strengths are, and at least if you remember 2 or 3 and how to describe and explain those, whether it is to an employer or even your friends and your family, it's good to know more about you and how to really express yourself. So who are some of these employers in the UK that are currently using strengths-based assessments? So here are a few household brands that you'll see on your screens here. So, they range through, some of them are financial services, professional services, oil and gas, telecommunications, whatever it is. I think the key take home on this slide is that strengths spans quite a few industries and sectors. So it's quite likely, if you're applying to one of those big companies, that you will at some point come across strengths. So taking a look back at your strengths profile and knowing what your strengths are at the moment is a great way to really put yourself kind of ahead of the game for a lot of these recruitment processes. And on that point, so anybody who does have a strengths profile, if you can have it to hand, it will really help bring in the strengths to life. And for those of you who haven't completed your strengths profile, no problem. There is a link, I'm told, that will be circulated to you following today's webinar, which you can click on and complete your profile. And that link doesn't expire, so you do still have time to do that. So these are a lot of our clients that are using strengths. And you will, if you're thinking of applying to some of these employers, you will need to know what your strengths are. So why do they use strengths? And the key thing really is about being able to assess you authentically. So some of you may have heard the word competency before. So that's slightly different, and it's all based on past experience, which we know can bias certain people who may not have had that experience. So these employers now use strengths so that you guys can show up with all of you, who you are, and really let them know what's unique and what value are you bringing to their organizations in the most authentic way that's you. So some of the benefits of using strengths versus competencies. So, those who use their strengths at a lot of those organizations, they're happier, you're more confident, your energy is higher. And, if your energy is higher, you'll be more productive. So the key takeaway is, it's not just being able to technically do your job, but also being happy, fulfilled and flourishing whilst you're doing the job. You'll be happier, your experience with your colleagues will be a lot warmer, and you'll just get more out of the whole career experience, even if that is just for an internship or full-time paid work. Just being technically good at your job it's not enough. We want you guys to be happy and also flourishing in your roles and what you choose to do in your next steps. So you're more likely to achieve your goals and also develop faster in your areas of strength. So what does that develop faster mean? That means, yes, you may be great and get that job that you're looking for, but then, within that year, you could get promoted 2 or 3 times. That's the kind of thing that we see when people are in their areas of strengths, they're in flow and great things happen from that. And you'll just be more confident in your career choices overall, rather than think, some of you may know what you want to go into next, and others may be thinking, I'm not quite sure. So your strengths profile will have, towards the back of it, it will have your career guide suggestions. So if you're not sure of where would you like to start with your career following studies, there are some suggestions in your profile there that, based on your performance and energy, you would be great at. So, really tie in with pathways and have a think and explore some of those job sectors, and maybe they could point you into the direction for some potential applications to be applying for. So in terms of, when you notice strengths, so what would a strength look like if you would, you'd be more passionate, you'd be focused, animated. So for those of us who might be slightly quieter in our nature, let's not think that we have to be jazz hands and, bells and whistles. What we mean by animated is, you might be slightly smiling some more or sitting up in your chair. So when you are going for those assessment centres or strengths-based interviews or even telephone interviews, do be mindful of, it's not just what you say, but how you say it. Do your eyes light up? Do you just sit up slightly more in your chair? Because these are the kinds of things that are being assessed with strengths assessment. It's not just the performance, but it's also the energy element. So do be mindful of behavior and how your body language does show up. We also know when you're using your strengths, you're probably more likely to volunteer for things. So before someone's even had a chance to finish the sentence, a teacher might have said, would anybody like to, your hand's already up, you've already done it. Likewise, there might be things on your to-do list that you never get around to actually writing on the to-do list because you've already done them. You don't need a list to remind you. So just be mindful that those are the kinds of things when you're using your strengths versus when you're not. And these are the kinds of things that employers are looking for. What naturally gets your attention and sparks your engagement. So in terms of what is a strength, I'm going to do a quick whistle stop of this, but it's 3 core elements. So it's performance, energy, and use. So if you completed the strengths profile, you would have answered 60 questions on performance, 60 on energy, and 60 on use. So sometimes when I ask, what is a strength? A lot of people say it's what I'm good at. And that is true to an extent. It is what we are good at, but also how we feel when we're using that particular strength is also as important, because we can be good at things, but doesn't necessarily mean we're energized by them. And equally, we can also be good at things, but we don't use them very often, so they're more likely to be a hobby. So it's having the right combination of performance, energy, and use is something to be mindful of when you're applying for your careers and your next steps. So based on performance, energy, and use, always remember those 3 core elements. Even if you're going for an assessment center, an interview, all these things, it's always performance, energy, and use. Your answers can be technically brilliant, but if there's no energy and passion behind it, then that's where the scores may slightly fall. But anyway, performance, energy, and use, we then get what we call the 4-box, our model of development, which is the 4 boxes. And we go around these boxes anti-clockwise. So starting with your realized strengths in the top left, so that's the dark green box. These are the strengths that you perform well, you find energizing, and the use is quite high. So the advice there is to use these strengths wisely, because you are great at them and you're really energized by them, but we wouldn't want you to overplay them too much. These are likely to be the strengths that you recognize in yourself, and your friends, family, teachers also know in you too. So if you're stuck for stories, perhaps ask your friends if they see some of these strengths, what stories could they give you, or your teachers, or even your parents. Just for yourself, start having a think about it. If you have that narrator or your realized strengths, what is it about stories that you like to tell, or humor? Are you the life and soul of the party? You're always making people around you laugh. What is it about these strengths that you can explain to your future employers? I'm then going to move on to learned behaviors. So these are strengths that we perform well, but for whatever reason we find de-energizing, and the use around these varies. So again, some of these learned behaviors may have previously been realized strengths. We've just used them too much, so our energy may have dipped. And that's why we say for realized strengths, use those wisely, because we don't want them to become learned behaviors. But equally, these could be things that we have just learned to do really well. So we might have had some training, some mentoring on these things. And you know what, we've got it to great, but we're just not energized by them. And that's no bad thing, because remember, you perform them well. So they are a great resource for you and for your employer. But the thing to think about is, yes, I can do this, but do I want to do this? And knowing that, that will put you in good stead for your careers, 5-10 years from now, because you will get good at a lot of things in your careers, I can promise you that, but it doesn't mean you'll be energized by everything you'll be doing. So do be mindful of that. We then have weaknesses. So these are things that you self-reports performing poorly, that we're just not energized by them, and the use may vary. So the thing, let's not get too hung up on the weaknesses here. I think the thing to really consider is, do you think you'll need that weakness for the role or job that you see yourself doing in the future? And if you do, maybe get some training and get it to good enough. And if you don't, then just know what it is, and accept it, and really focus on your realized and unrealized strengths. So on that, now we're going to come lastly to unrealized strengths. So these are things that you perform well, you find energizing, and the use is slightly lower on these. So we'd like to use our unrealized strengths more. Now, some of you might have a full 7 unrealized strengths on your profile. Some of you may have slightly less. But either way, this is what we call potential. You may have heard, people say, realize your potential. And so some of these strengths might be new to you. You might have not known that they were there. But remember, the report has said that you perform them well, and you are energized by them. So the use may just be because you're a student at the moment and you just don't actually have the opportunity to use them slightly anymore. It could be confidence. You could just need some more training and encouragement in that area. Or it could just be a hobby. So that creativity or that innovation might just be that baking you like to do on the weekend. It's not something you like to do Monday to Friday. So have a think about which of these unrealized strengths are ones you'd like to use in your future career, and explore some more, maybe through internships or work experience, you never know. And which ones you like, do you know what, I like that, but I don't really want to use that, because you don't have to use all of your unrealized strengths, but know that the potential is there. So in terms of the model, we like to focus on the top two boxes. So that's the realized strength. So these are the ones you can do and you love to do. They will show up at the assessment center, your interview. They're with you right now. Lots of stories. And then we've got the unrealized strengths, which you love to use and you can use more often. So if you're, an employer is talking about this is you now, where do you see yourself in a few months, years time? You could perhaps talk about some of these unrealized strengths as the potential you. Also, so now we're just going to take a look at your profile. So as I mentioned, those of you who have completed a strengths profile will have something similar on the screen here, but with your own strengths on it. So I'm going to kind of let you guys have a look at your profiles for a minute. And then on the following pages from that page where you can see your quadrants, there's a bit of explanation. So do use the description. So for example, here, the number one strength is pride on this report, and it has the description about what pride is and how to describe it. And then it gives you some advice and coaching tips on how you can use that strength wisely. Now, I've had questions before, can you use some of this, on application forms and, personal statements and whatever, CVs and LinkedIn? Absolutely, use all of the content of your strengths profile to think, all right, I've been asked to describe myself, how can I do that? So every bit of advice on your profile, maximize it, put it on your LinkedIn, put it on your CV, memorize it if you want to for an interview, but in your own personal way. It's all there to help you flourish and show up. So I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions, both from you, Catherine, or anybody in that's joined the call.
Sure, yeah. Lauren, I had a question just out of, well, I guess I know we'll go into this later, but when you did your profile, were there any that you were surprised at, or but like with mine, a few, there were a few ones that I was surprised with. So just out of interest, how did you find it when you first did your profile?
So I'm gonna just share a bit about share my realized and unrealized strength when I first started my role. So on the screen here, this is the profile that I took back in 2018 when I first joined Cappfinity as a consultant. So the surprises, I think, for me were definitely in my unrealized strengths. And even my realized strengths, I think gratitude, I didn't realize at the time it was so high for me as a strength. But the prevention and the planner and the time optimizer as my realized strengths, they weren't a surprise, because when I first joined that role, I was very much in a project management space, coordinating things. So it very much took on the shape of a project manager. So a lot of those strengths made sense at the time. I think what I've probably worked on since then is a lot of my unrealized strengths. So things like the self-belief, even the narrator and connector, I've had to really use more with clients. So whilst my role started as project management, so as you'll see, guys, those strengths are good for that type of role. My role has since evolved and be more client facing and more coaching and training. So some of that prevention planner and organizer, I still use it. It's just slightly lower down on my profile. So if I go to my most recent profile here that you'll see, now I'm doing more coaching and training things. I'm using strengths like listener and explainer, feedback more than I was using the whole prevention planner and organizer. Now, in terms of my career, if I wanted to use those prevention planning and organizing skills more, absolutely I would, and I'd be fine to do that. But right now I'm happier using my listener, explainer, and those types of strengths. So hopefully that brings to life for you guys how I've just talked about using the language of strengths, but how I've used what I needed when I needed to, kind of thing. Thanks for that great question there, Catherine.
Yeah, no, that's okay. And I guess as to follow on from that, it's about, you see your strengths, but it's about utilizing them in the right way and sort of knowing how to do so. I think we have a question that's just come in.
Yeah.
an anonymous attendee, which is absolutely fine. I potentially have an Accenture interview coming up in a week. It's the final interview. How can I prepare for a strengths-based interview? Please give me any tips you have. Absolutely great question there. Thank you very much for asking. So I guess, Lauren, how, any of the top tips to best prepare for a strengths-based interview? It's quite, when I speak to students, they find that quite daunting. They're like, oh gosh, what is that? How do I revise for that? So it'd be interesting to see what you think. Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for that. And can you all see my screen okay?
Yeah, all great.
Perfect. So what I would say is, so if you've got an interview, have a think about, so this is you showing up. So in terms of your realized and unrealized strengths, really look at that on your profile, because are some of them communicating? Do you have any listener, explainer on there? Is spotlight on your profile anywhere? So have a think about how you're going to show up with that positive energy. If you have got explainer as your realized strengths, then so the difference between explainer and narrator. Narrators will probably give you more of the story, or you never guess what happened on my way here to this interview, and that happened, and I saw this person. Whereas the explainer is more like to the point, and this is what happened. Yeah. So, just even me explaining that to you, there was a slight difference between the explainer and the narrator strengths there. So knowing your strengths and what you're going to be bringing to that interview is a first great step. There are some tips here on the screen in terms of strengths-based interview. Be authentic, because that's why the employer is using strengths and not competencies. They want to see you. They want to know more about you. So the more you can give them through the descriptions, just the more amazing you're going to be through the processes. In the interview, you might have to get comfortable with silences, because the interviewer won't be probing much. So they will ask you a question and you can give your response. And if the response is short and there's silence, it doesn't necessarily mean that's a good or a bad thing. That's just part of the strengths-based interview process. They don't probe and probe and probe to get to a specific response. They kind of leave you to give your responses. The interview may feel quite conversational as well. You might think, is this even an interview? But it really is. And the questions are quite fast-paced as well. Some other tips I can give you around that is, be yourself and stay calm. Letting them know what you really are like, and just making sure that you're right for the role, and let your individuality shine through. I wouldn't get too hung up on trying to model yourself on previous people who have been successful in the role, or maybe even alumni who are there. That's them and their strengths, and you're bringing your uniqueness, your strengths and your stories. So yeah, just really embrace your individuality and your uniqueness. I'd expect quite a few questions in the interview, and you may be asked how you feel in relation to a particular question. And I suppose that's the area that's tapping into the energy. So they may be able to sense from your answer that, yes, you can do it. Okay, but how did you feel when you were doing it? Were you, and I suppose they're kind of getting, if you think about feelings, that's the energy part of the strengths. Were you energized, de-energized? And do remember as well, if you are pretending to be energized by something, there's only so long you'll be able to fake it, essentially, because even if you get the role, you'll be energized for so long, and then eventually you will just become de-energized. So be authentic with your answers, because that energy and feeling piece is a two-way street. As much as they're trying to get the authentic you also want to be happy in the job too. So do be honest with your responses, and really use it as an opportunity to understand more about the organization. I'd say be mindful of body language, and how what you say comes across, because that too is being assessed. And lastly, I'd say enjoy it. A strengths-based interview is genuinely a two-way process. The interviewer is interested in getting to know you and you them. So just really enjoy it. And the more you settle into it, I think the more you'll get from it, and they'll be able to assess in you. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, that's great. Hope that helps. That's great, Lauren. Thank you.
There's just a few more kind of tips there for interview preparation, reflecting on the stories that your friends have said, your achievements, what do you truly enjoy doing?
Yeah, and I think, as you say, like, just to enjoy it. So I think when you're, enjoying what you are saying, that will come across in your body language, in how you say things, in your facial expression. You'll be smiling, and then it just really shows how you know, how either how much you want this or how best suited you are for the role. So it makes it easier for the person assessing you.
Yeah, and so we've got a question here around, you know, what does positive energy look like? And I think, you know, it's not really smoke screens and it's not rocket science. You can see it in your friends. You know, when someone just turns up and you think, gosh, what happened? You know, the assessors too, they are human and they can pick up on, you know, nervousness, or not that would work against you, but relax, enjoy it, get into the groove of the interview. You know, if your body language is closed, your arms are down, your shoulders are down, it just signals maybe not necessarily what you're feeling. So just being self-aware of how your body language is in the room. So you've got another question here around simulation style online tests. So I'm going to now flip to some other slides. Just bear with me a moment. On the interviewing.
Great, some great questions, guys. Thanks very much.
So let me just.
And I guess now, obviously, you know, in the current situation, assessment centres are now happening online. So again, I guess it's slightly different, isn't it? I did speak to one student who they did an assessment centre and they said they felt more relaxed because they were at home. So you've got to think of, you know, that's an added bonus, isn't it? You haven't got to worry about missing the train, running late, getting caught in the rain. So all those things are already out of the picture, so you can be settled in your own home, and then hopefully, you know, it's better. But yeah, over to you, Lauren.
Cool. So here on the screen now, you can see some popular strengths that we've highlighted. So here are some of the common strengths that employers are looking for. So they might be looking for 3 or 4 of them, or we don't know what combination, but here are some of the popular strengths, and they don't necessarily match directly to your profile. So don't be thinking, oh, I can't see data pragmatist on my profile, because that's not a name of a strength. But here are some popular strengths that they are looking for. And in terms of the online assessment, so here's an example that you can see on the screen. They're designed to be immersive. So you'll be kind of presented with a variety of different questions. So you can see here, there's question 1, 2, 3, and 4. You can click on any question you like. You don't have to go in any particular order. And once you click on, let's say, question 2, you will have a set of responses that you can either rank, or you just maybe pick how you would respond, from what you're most likely to do to what you're least likely to do. For other questions, you may be asked to consider some more information. So it could be like numerical data that you need to give some analysis on, based on a multiple choice responses. So the questions on the online tips is kind of online assessment, is, you know, it can vary, but the whole point is it's going to give you a realistic preview of what you will be doing in the role. And the scenarios are very much like that too. In terms of tips for the online assessments, do be mindful that there's no time limit. However, do aim to complete the assessment in one sitting, because the recruiters can see, you know, if you started on Wednesday and completed it on Saturday, they can see that on your application. So do be mindful, whilst it's not time limited, they can see when you started and finished completed the assessment. Always complete the assessment in a quiet environment. You know, we don't like distractions because that can impact your responses and your concentration levels. So, you know, if you are going to be at home doing an assessment center or an online test, make sure your environment is, you know, quiet enough for you to concentrate, no dogs in the background or other siblings distracting you if you can. And always answer honestly. Don't think that you're trying to give an answer, you're trying to rank the answers based on what you think would be best for the role, but just do what you would do most naturally to you in the role, so that you do get the best fit, you know, if you are successful for the role. And do be mindful that once you've submitted an answer on the kind of the online questions and you've ranked your data or whatever it is you're doing, you won't be able to go back and change it. So once you've kind of submitted an answer, that is it. We do have another example here of a situational strengths test. Again, it's designed to give you an authentic preview into the role. So here you can see there's a video that they would have showed you, and then you've got responses on what you would do in response to that video. And then there's another way, you know, some employers, rather than you ranking your responses from most likely to least likely, they like you to video record your response. So, I mean, you know, you've been presented with a scenario, and then in the same way you can see me now through Zoom, you know, similar, different platform and technology, but you'll have to give your results through a video too. And then at the end of all these online tests, you will get a feedback report. And so do read through that feedback report, and maybe, you know, look at that next to your own strengths profile to see, you know, what strengths you may have used in that process, and maybe which ones, you know, you can help you going forward next time. But do definitely read through those feedback reports, because they do have lots of nuggets of insight, and it can actually just, you know, settle you from the process you've just been through, and also set you in more success for the next step or the next process that you will be going through in the recruitment process. So I'm going to pause there and see if we have any other questions from anybody else.
Yeah, we've got one from Ryan. In terms of gamification, how do employers assess your strengths through this method? My current employer is moving towards a system like this.
So I think with gamification, they're really looking at, and gamification is not the type of assessment that you'll be doing with strengths and Cappfinity. They are a different type of assessment, but really it's about looking at your behaviors. So what do you naturally gravitate towards when you're in that virtual reality, or you know, it's very much a behavioral assessment. They're looking at the things you do and the techniques that you take. You know, what are your thinking strengths to approaching a particular task? You know, how did your competitive strengths show up? If you've got other characters in the game that you're playing, do you collaborate with them? Do you work more independently? So they're seeing and they're assessing your different types of behaviors that you use there. So I'm just going to flip to the next slide on this, because it does talk about assessment centers. So in your assessment centers, you may do something. So the fourth box here, you can see virtual reality. So whilst it's not gamification, it is kind of, you know, it is removing you from the real world, as it were. And we do assess kind of virtual reality. And I suppose what virtual reality is about is assessment of your truest self. So some of these environments may look like, you know, the Accenture reception desk. You know, how do you approach that person? You've got a meeting and you're late, or something's happened. You know, it's looking at your real life responses within that particular situation. So I suppose, you know, gamification works similar to that. They want to immerse you into the world whilst assessing you in the most authentic way. Because sometimes, you know, questions, here's a scenario, what is your response? It doesn't feel as authentic as, you know, if you're playing a game, what are the strategies you use in order to get to the next level or complete the particular test? So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah, and great question. Thanks, Ryan. I had just thought of another question, Lauren, actually. Obviously, when students are applying for different roles, you know, it might be a tech company, it might be an accountancy firm. How would a student show that, you know, they're really interested in that topic? You know, I guess, is it by the body language? Is it how they say their answers? Because I guess the employer wants to make sure that they're the right person for this role. So I guess, how would a student show their love for whether it's tech or accountancy? How would they do that?
I suppose even if you worked in, let's say, tech, you're going to be in a very technical role in tech, but not necessarily, because you could work for a tech firm and be working in HR, which is very people focused. So I think it's not so much about the industry and the strengths you need. Yes, that does help, and do look at your job sectors for that mapping. But have a think about, so if a lot of your real-life strengths say things like narrator, rapport builder, spotlight, you know, you're probably more likely to be people-orientated. So if that's the case, you love working with people, you get a buzz from it, people get a buzz from you, whether that's in financial services, tech, professional services, FMCG, pharmaceuticals, you know, people are the common thread. So I think to be looking for jobs that will help you flourish, and, you know, as long as they're people-based, collaborative, you know, whether that's in person or virtual teams, you know, it's noticing what your strengths are. So if you have strengths in your profile like innovation or creativity, you know, what types of sectors will allow you to really maximize those strengths. Innovation is an interesting one. So strengths profile defines innovation as, you know, it's creating things outside of the box, you know, so much so, you know, why is there even a box? It's that kind of never been thought of, never been done before. So having a think about, well, if you like using those strengths and you want to be innovative in your career, so the types of organizations you're applying for, will they allow you to be that creative? That innovative? You know, maybe you might want to go to a startup. They might give you free reign on a product or whatever to completely make it your own. Whereas if you go somewhere that's more established, that innovation process might be slightly more iterative. Versus creativity is around, you know, it's things that already exist, and you see how you can improve things, or have you thought about this? So, you know, just knowing what your strengths are and what you're bringing to the industry, I think is a better way to look at it than, all right, this is the tech sector, what strengths are they looking for? Because there's a broad range of jobs within a particular sector.
Yeah, great. And I think I like the point that you add on, you know, whether you work for a startup, because I guess not everyone is best suited to a great big corporate company. You know, do have a look at others. So it's all about, I guess, you and how you, as Lauren said, how you fit into that role and that company as well.
And we do look into that some more, so that we call that career anchors. So above and beyond your strengths, what are the things that are really going to anchor you in your career? Do you value flexibility? Do you value variety in your role? Or that innovation, you know, and really have a think about the values of the company and the organization, and even the team that you'll be working on. You know, will you get the opportunity to actually use those strengths that you're really passionate about? Great. And are there any other questions from you guys who on your profiles? Any strengths that you just don't get and you'd like me to perhaps maybe help you understand some more? If you have work ethic as a learned behavior, doesn't mean you don't like work. It means you're a very hard worker, but you also enjoy your downtime and holiday time. So that kind of life study balance in, you know, yes, we're great students, but we also enjoy going on holiday with our friends and family too. So do be mindful that work ethic as a learned behavior is the #1 global learned behavior. So you're not alone in that one.
I guess that's the thing, Lauren, just to jump in, it's not only thinking about your strengths in the workplace environment, but also how you use them in your personal life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And for that balance, you know, your humor is probably something you use at home and whilst you're studying. It's just something that goes with you. So on your profiles, have a look at those realized strengths and just be like, you know, I'd be lost without some of my, like, for example, my strength in prevention. I'd be lost without that. Not to go on too much about me, but what does that mean for me? So I'm the type of person at work, I like to, you know, to my boss, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? What about this? What about that? In my personal life, you know, I'm planning Christmas and we're in April. This is the kind of things that, you know, it's just me, guys. I'm always thinking ahead. You know, I've kind of learned to embrace that, and I now explain it through the word prevention, because before I did it, but I didn't have a word for it. But now I know it's just the strength of prevention.
That's great. We've got a question through. What does the unrealized strength spotlight mean?
So spotlight is around, you know, naturally gravitating to being the center of attention. So if you think about, even in your context now as a student, the teacher is in the spotlight. You guys as the students are learning and they are front and center. So spotlight in the workplace could be a presentation. It could be what I'm doing now, delivering a webinar for you guys. You know, if you're in a social gathering, you wouldn't mind taking the floor or sharing a story. So with spotlight, being unrealized, that's a fantastic role, strength. If you're going into a role that's particularly client facing, or you are the face of a company or a product or a team or a project, that's brilliant for really being noticed. And I suppose Spotlight is good for, if you have, take a look at your profile, other strengths like connector and rapport builder. Because I think with Spotlight being unrealized, if you just, you know, through, you could use that strength so much more with your network and getting noticed, as it's something that you're energized by and you're good at, but you may just not have the opportunity purely because you're a student at the moment to really use that spotlight. But in your career, you know, it's a free, like, you know, the floor's kind of yours and you can make it your own. You know, or you might not want to be, you might like to use it when you choose to, not have to use it all the time. So it's totally up to you in terms of that spotlight strength, but it's a really great strength to have. So if you're applying for jobs that are particularly front facing, front of house, you can be confident that you'll be comfortable in that space. If you were, you know, had to do a presentation, or you're going for an assessment center even, you know, you may have to deliver a presentation or one-to-one, or, you know, deliver the results of a group exercise. If they need somebody to say, you know, as a group, you've collaborated on this, who's going to present it to the assessors? Well, if you have Spotlight, actually, you know, I wouldn't mind taking the floor and presenting back what the team have come up with. But you might want to think about what are your communicating strengths then that you're going to, you know, tie up nicely with that Spotlight. So whilst you may give that presentation or that feedback of your group assessment, are you going to do it through your explainer, your feedback, or your narrator strengths? What's your, so whilst you are in the spotlight, like I'm in the spotlight now, I'm using more explainer than I am narrator. So it's having a think about how you're going to show up with your spotlight. Hopefully that helps.
That's great. Thanks, Lauren. Actually, I thought I would share my unrealized strength in case anyone else has the same. So mine is feedback. So what does that mean?
Feedback is around giving, so we can look at the definition of feedback at the back of your report, but it's definitely, in terms of your career, feedback is a good one. So, you know, it could be around more mentoring, getting involved in more mentoring and coaching, that one-to-one. You know, in your role now, I'm sure in your future, you'll be managing more, developing your role more in that space. So having a think about, you know, because managers tend to get promoted in your role through you're brilliant at it, but the people side of managing people is not necessarily great. People enjoy so much. So feedback is an awesome strength if you're thinking of, you know, wanting to progress your career in that kind of. I've got the definitions here. So feedback is about you provide fair and accurate feedback to others to help them develop. So it's about how you help other people. So in your profile, I don't know if you have other strengths like enabler, and also growth, but feedback can really be your vessel towards unlocking other strengths, if that makes sense.
Okay, cool. Yeah, no, thanks for that. And hopefully maybe some of you guys have that as yours as well. I'm just conscious of time, so if anyone does have any questions, please do ask. But as always, if after the session you suddenly think of a question, then you can get in touch with us. So just bear with me one moment. So guys, hang on a second. There we go. So that it brings us on to the last part of our session now, just wrapping up. Lauren, I found it really useful myself, so I hope everyone listening in has enjoyed it. And you know, as I said, if you haven't yet completed a strengths profile and would like to, we can share the link with you. And those of you that have, hopefully, you know, listening to others has given you a better understanding about your own strengths. But as always, you know, if you have any questions, Pathway CTM, we're here for you to support you. So please do get in touch. You can email us at student@pathwayctm.com, and I've also put into the chat box as it comes through. We have a webinar tomorrow with the co-op, so do make sure you check that out. Just take a couple of seconds to sign up. So if anyone is interested in looking at how science plays a role in retail, so it could be quite an interesting one. So do join us there for that one. And yeah, thanks very much to Lauren, and thanks to you guys for joining us today on this afternoon's webinar. hope you've enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll see you guys again tomorrow. So thank you, everyone.
Thanks. And I've just dropped my LinkedIn. If anybody wants to connect with me or they have any other questions, I'm there.
Perfect. Thanks, guys.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.